You're watching Reality Check. The war over the farmers' bill has turned into a political war, a war of words, with both sides taking aim at each other, each claiming that one is more pro-farmer than the other and their rival is anti-farmer. So tonight we attempt to separate fact from fiction about whether there is indeed political doublespeak on all sides when it comes to the farmers' bill. At the moment, though, it's the government on the back foot with allegations that they are anti-farmer, to the extent that the full-page ads had to be taken out today, with the Prime Minister himself appearing on these ads to assure farmers that in fact they are not trying to defraud them and that the farmers are going to be given their minimum support price. That's the main anxiety of the farmers, that will they be getting their minimum support price even after the new bill comes in. But despite so much convincing at the highest level, why are farmers still unconvinced about the MSP factor? Number one of the government's MSP claims, are they fact or fiction, is the fact that only two crops are largely still getting minimum support price, and that is of course wheat and paddy. Wheat and paddy are almost getting their exact support price, the government promised price. But take bajra, MSP 2,150 rupees, farmers are only getting 1,348 rupees, 37% less. Ragi, MSP is 21% down. Maize, MSP is 1,850 rupees, farmers are only getting about 1,300 rupees, 30% down. Barley somewhat better, 4% down. These are all average wholesale prices, government website agmark.net, period August 2020. The other big factor which makes farmers anxious about MSP, across India, if you look in state after state, farmers don't get MSP on most days. Let's look at that. Days that farmers got minimum support price. For rice, Assam, 0 out of 42 days, farmers didn't get MSP. Chhattisgarh, 0 out of 122 days, farmers didn't get MSP. Tamil Nadu, only 3 out of 119 days, they didn't get the MSP. Uttar Pradesh, only 3 out of 123 days. Look at wheat. UP, only 44 out of 101 days. Haryana, only 57 out of 65 days. Rajasthan, only 59 out of 101 days. MP, only 73 out of 101 days. And finally, the other reason for the apprehension that farmers have about the fact that the minimum support price regime may not sustain these changes or these reforms is the fact that since the Modi government has come, it has made repeated statements which call into question how truly committed they are to the minimum support price regime and government procurement. In August 2014, right after the government came in, the centre curtailed the power of states to give a bonus over minimum support price. Over the MSP, states would give 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 rupee bonuses. The centre came down very hard on that. In January 2015, the famous Shanta Kumar committee said that they wanted to reduce the food security footprint from covering 67% of the population to only 40% of the population, which would obviously mean that government procurement comes down. And in December 2015, this is a Niti Aayog report, a position paper, which says there is a pressing need for the reorientation of price policy. This goal cannot be achieved through procurement-backed MSP, however, because it is neither possible nor desirable for the government to buy each commodity in each market in all regions. Now, this is not to say that it's only the Modi government which could be accused of not having delivered its promises to farmers. Remember, the opposition is on the attack and the Congress leading the pack. But if you look at the data for really how much investment there has been in agriculture, the picture does not very good for all parties. Public investment in agriculture as a percentage of the agricultural gross value added. Look at the graph there. Starting from 2011-12 of the UPA years, just 2.4% is what has been invested. It remains stagnant during the UPA years, 2.4%, 2.4%, 2.1%. NDA not much better, roughly between 2.3 to 2.8%. only rising in 2018-19 to a paltry 3.3%. Okay, so what's really then the question here about whether politicians, ruling party, opposition, how genuine are they then to the cause of farmers that they've now started to champion? I spoke earlier to P. Chidambaram, senior Congress leader and Rajya Sabha MP, and I asked him that at the outset. Let's listen. Congress is very much spearheading these protests, the political protests against the Farm Bill. But the question being asked is that the Congress in its own manifesto in 2019 had promised to do exactly the same thing, which is repeal the APMC Act. So I know that you've tweeted saying that it's a misrepresentation that the BJP is saying, that you'd also promised to set up a number of farmers' markets. But isn't that splitting hairs? Because essentially, wasn't the Congress effectively promising the same thing?
No. You asked the same question to Mr. Bhupinder Hooda, and I thought you gave you an answer. Please read the whole section clearly and completely. What does the section say?
Okay.
That we will repeal the APMC Act and free trade. It says also, and that is the soul of the promise, that we will create farmers' markets in large villages and small towns so that the farmer can bring his or her produce to the markets. It also says we will promote farmers, producer organizations and companies in order to enable the farmer to access technology, inputs and markets. The word market occurs in that section at least 4 or 5 times. Idea is this APMC today is a very limited market accessible to a very small number of people. I've got the data and I will share the data with you presently as we go along. What farmers need is 12, 13 crore farmers, families need is thousands of markets in large villages, small towns, which they can access. Today, barring 6% of the farmers, 94% have no access to this APMC for a variety of reasons. So we create these markets, we create a competitive, accessible market ecosystem, and then in due course, as a natural sequel, that the APMC will either be there or not there, we can repeal the APMC Act. Please read the whole section clearly. The soul of the promise is thousands of large markets.
I actually went through your manifesto and I saw the points you made. In fact, it first says that we will repeal the Act, and the point following that says that we will create markets. But effectively, Mr. Chidambaram, doesn't that come to the same thing? That when you say you will create thousands of markets, effectively what the center is saying is that we repeal the APMC Act and then let 1,000 flowers bloom. All kinds of players can come and trade with the farmers wherever they want.
No. What the BJP is saying is exact opposite of what the Congress said. What the BJP is saying is APMC will continue with all its inefficiencies and inaccessibility, and the rest of it will be free for all. On the contrary, what we are saying is we will create markets. We will establish markets. The market can be run by the state government, by a cooperative society, by a panchayat, or by even a licensed private operator, like warehouses today are run by licensed private operators. There will be light regulation in the market. The market will be a place where people can buy and sell. It will not be a situation where you can buy and sell at the farm gate. You will have to come to the market, and the market will be, since thousands of markets will be created, there will be a market within 3 or 4 kilometers of the farmer in every place of India. Large villages and small towns. Count the number of small towns and large villages of India. Thousands and thousands of markets will be created under the Congress proposal.
But what would you say, Mr. Chidambaram, to the charge that the Congress has now woken up to the plight of the farmers, but you had 10 years in government? why not create all these thousands of markets that you spoke about then? Why not guarantee or make MSP mandatory to farmers then?
Of course. Why not send a spaceship or a satellite to the moon 20 years ago? Why not do a nuclear test 30 years ago? Every government does what it can and what it's feasible to do at that given time. Successive governments build upon that. Every government stands on the shoulders of the previous government. Everything can't be done in the first 5 years or 10 years. These questions are completely irrelevant. Is it that for 10 years we did nothing? We did no reform? We didn't deliver 8.5% average growth in the first 5 years and 7.5% growth in all the 10 years taken together? Was it not the golden period of economic growth of India?
Right.
You are asking the question as though we did nothing and the only thing we ought to have done is to create these markets, which is why we build upon previous successes, previous accomplishments, and move on.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chidambaram, thank you very much indeed for joining us on NDTV. Thanks very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, P. Chidambaram there. Let's just go across now to our panel. We've got with us J.P. Dalal. He's the Agriculture Minister of Haryana. He's from the BJP. We have Pawan Kheda, spokesperson Congress, with us. We have Devinder Sharma, Food Trade Policy Analyst, and Siraj Hussain, former Secretary Agriculture, Government of India. J.P. Dalal साहब, आपने शायद सुना होगा कि जैसे हमने आपने इंट्रोडक्शन में बताया कि आप कह रहे हैं कि एमएसपी से कोई किसान को डरने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, प्रधानमंत्री जी के नाम से एड्स भी निकाले गए हैं, लेकिन अगर आप खुद देखें तो कितने सारे ऐसे फसल हैं जिसमें अभी भी किसान को एमएसपी नहीं मिल रही है, और यही वजह है कि किसान डर रहे हैं कि ये इससे कोई एमएसपी की गारंटी नहीं है, बल्कि इससे हालत और खराब हो जाएगी।
देखिए, अभी सबसे पहले तो मैं आदरणीय चिदंबरम जी की विचारों को सुन रहा था। वो बड़े वकील हैं और उन्होंने बड़ी साफ गोई से जो बात उन्होंने रखी थी उसको घुमाने की कोशिश की है। आज भारतीय जनता पार्टी ने जो बिल पास किए हैं, हूबहू यही मांग आज से कोई 8 साल पहले पार्लियामेंट में इनके बहुत सारे सांसदों ने की। हमारे मनमोहन सिंह जी की अध्यक्षता में हुड्डा साहब और बहुत मुख्यमंत्रियों की कमेटी थी, मैंने पढ़ा है उसमें जो उनकी रिकमेंडेशन थी, ये रिकमेंडेशन उनकी थी। मुझे समझ में नहीं आता कि इनकी वक्त में इनकी इच्छा शक्ति या कोई कोएलिशन प्रॉब्लम होगी या कोई और विषय होगा, ये नहीं कर पाए। आज वही चीज़ जो किसान हितैषी हैं उसको करने का हमने जो बीड़ा उठाया।
आप कह रहे हैं, आपने मेरे सवाल का जवाब नहीं दिया। नहीं मंत्री जी, आपने मेरे सवाल का जवाब नहीं दिया कि अब कांग्रेस की बात तो ठीक है, लेकिन अगर आपकी बात करें तो अगर किसान इससे इतने खुश हैं तो वो सड़कों पे क्यों उतरे हुए हैं फिर?
देखिए, किसान को कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, बहुमत का किसान इससे बहुत खुश है, खेतों में व्यस्त है किसान। एक भय जरूर है, जो मंडी का आड़ती है और व्यापारी है, ये मोनोपोली की आइटम हो गई है मंडियों के अंदर। हरियाणा के अंदर 150 के आसपास मंडियां हैं, एवरेज 15-20 हज़ार व्यापारी हैं।
आड़ती नहीं, किसान भी तो उतरे हुए हैं।
नहीं, देखिए, आड़ती हमारे हरियाणा के
किसान भी तो प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं, पूरे देश में वो प्रोटेस्ट फैल गए।
मैं आपको बताता हूं कि हरियाणा और पंजाब के अंदर मंडियों के अंदर जो बड़े किसान हैं वही आजकल आड़ती हो गए हैं, और वो प्रोक्योरमेंट का काम के अलावा पूंजी का व्यवसाय भी करते हैं, छोटे किसानों को पैसा ब्याज पे देते हैं। और एक वक्त की जरूरत थी जब बैंक नहीं होते थे।
आप कह रहे हैं कि सिर्फ आज आप कह रहे हैं कि सिर्फ बड़े किसान और आड़ती इज द फॉर आवर व्यूअर्स कमीशन एजेंट्स, बट पवन खेड़ा, रिस्पॉन्ड टू दैट He's saying these are only big farmers and commission agents, or in fact, commission agents and big farmers, they become the same, who are protesting.
Vasu, they are trying to spread a confusion that the farmers were enshackled under APMC and they were not free to sell outside the APMC. Show me one year, 1 month, 1 day in the last 70 years that the farmer was not free to sell outside APMC. He was always free to sell outside APMC. The price discovery, that is a very important term which we need to bring into this debate. How does price discovery happen? The price discovery happens when he goes to the APMC yard and there are artiyas there auctioning the material, the produce. That's how there is a benchmark set of the price. Now, under the new system which they've forced on this country, how will there be a price discovery? Mr. Dalal can enlighten us. Mr. Modi has failed to. Price discovery कैसे होगा दलाल साहब जब auction ही नहीं होगी, जब आप मंडी में जाएंगे ही नहीं? And the other thing is the level playing field. There is an absence of level playing field. The mandi will have to pay the market fee and the development fund. Whereas the private player outside the mandi will have no such problems. He will not have to pay the market fee or the development fund. तो लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड तो वहीं खत्म हो गई, इसलिए मंडी भी खत्म हो गई. और जब मंडी खत्म हो जाएगी दलाल साहब, तो आप एमएसपी बढ़ा देंगे. और पब्लिक नहीं, बहुत जरूरी है पब्लिक प्रोक्योरमेंट. ये दो शब्द क्यों नहीं थे उस बिल में? एमएसपी बिल में क्यों नहीं था? आप ये दो शब्द ले आइए, हमें कोई आपत्ति नहीं है, किसानों को कोई आपत्ति नहीं है.
अच्छा, मुझे पवन जी, I need to, पवन खेड़ा, I need to go to the other panelists, but before that, very quickly, मंत्री जी, मैं से आपसे बस एक सवाल पूछना चाहूंगा कि क्या आप एटलीस्ट मानते हैं कि एमएसपी अगर बिल में लिख देते तो क्या दिक्कत होती? क्या इसको नहीं डालने से आपको बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है? अब आपके खुद के एक एलाय तो छोड़ चुके हैं पंजाब में, और आपके हरियाणा एलाय भी थोड़ा से डामाडोल लग रहे हैं.
ये जो
एमएसपी क्यों नहीं लिख देते?
ये जो बिल आए हैं, एमएसपी डिसाइड कौन करता है? एग्रीकल्चर प्राइस कॉस्ट कमीशन अलग से है, अलग व्यवस्था है. उसकी हर साल जो एक फार्मूला बना हुआ है कि आपकी इनपुट कॉस्ट पे 50% प्रॉफिट देके हर साल होता ही है, एक व्यवस्था है. इस बिल से उसका कोई व्यवस्था नहीं है, उसको डिस्टर्ब नहीं किया गया है. और उसी का परिणाम ये है कि कल परसों ही हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी ने अगले साल की एमएसपी डिक्लेयर भी कर दी है. एक भ्रांति फैलाई गई थी कि मंडियां नहीं रहेंगी, एमएसपी नहीं रहेगी.
डिक्लेयर तो इससे दालें और प्याज निकाल दिया, ये भी बताइए ना. कल पार्लियामेंट ने एक और काम भी तो आज किया, नहीं तो वो क्यों नहीं बता रहे?
एक्चुअली
महत्वपूर्ण क्रॉप्स निकाल दिए.
एक सेकंड
एसेंशियल कमोडिटीज एक्ट से, वह भी बताइए देश को.
मुझे खेड़ा
हम लोगों को व्यस्त रखते हो मुखर्जी और रिया जी ने कहा, और खुद क्या कर रहे हो?
खेड़ा जी से एक चीज का बात जवाब देना चाहता हूँ कि प्राइस डिस्कवरी की बात की. हम कोई मंडी, हम मंडियां खत्म करने नहीं जा रहे. मंडियां रहेंगी, लेकिन आज
प्लेइंग फील्ड नहीं रहेगी तो मंडी कैसे रहेगी?
एक सेकंड पवन, आई रिक्वेस्ट यू, आई नीड टू गो टू द अदर्स.
फीस नहीं देनी है, मंडी कैसे रहेगी?
ओके, आई विल कम बैक टू बोथ ऑफ यू.
लेट मी एक्सप्लेन माय पॉइंट.
अच्छा, एक सेकंड प्लीज, मुझे बाकी गेस्ट पे भी जाना है. दलाल साहब, मंत्री जी, पवन खेड़ा, आई रिक्वेस्ट यू टू गो टू द अदर गेस्ट. आई जस्ट वांट टू से दैट व्हाट यू सेड, Mr. Minister, about the fact that the government has hiked the MSP, this is the lowest hike in a decade. The wheat support price hike is 2.6%, lowest in a decade. But anyway, Siraj Hussain, give us a sense, your sense, you served in the government for so many years. Why is it that something which everyone thought the way government is presenting it should be welcomed by all farmers, you don't see any farmers on the streets or roads welcoming it? The only farmers you see are those against it. Is it all political, or are there genuine fears and concerns here?
Actually, in large parts of India, the MSP system does not really work, except for a few crops. And I must say that in the last 5-6 years, the government has been able to ramp up the procurement of some pulses and oil seeds, etc. Now, since the farmers in other states have not really had the benefit of selling their crop at MSP, they are not really affected by these bills which have been passed by both houses of parliament. However, in Punjab and Haryana, where the state governments over the last 40 years have set up a very robust system of procurement, the farmers fear that if the trade moves outside the APMC's jurisdiction, then somehow their procurement may be adversely affected. So this fear is driving the farmers, because in Punjab and Haryana, the crops are not at all diversified. In these two states, it is mostly wheat and rice. So the farmers are almost completely dependent on government procurement.
Okay. But that said, Devendra Sharma, the fact is that now this has become a big rallying point for the opposition. We've seen them take on the government. But as the data itself shows, public investment in agriculture has been very poor across party lines. So does any political party really have the moral high ground here?
Well, you are very right, and I was very happy when you, in your initial, presentation, when you talked about the economic design. I think that is very important to understand. The economic design that successive governments have followed is to push people out of rural areas into the urban areas. The World Bank had told us in 1996 to push 400 million people out of the rural areas into the urban areas by the year 2015 in the next 20 years. And that is what the successive governments have been actually busy doing it. And the best way to do it is to make agriculture uneconomical. And once you don't provide the real income to the farmers, what does he do? He has no option, but he wants to abandon agriculture and move into the cities to become Dihadi Mazdoor. I remember the Reserve Bank of India's former governor making a statement on an interview. He said that the biggest reform would be when we are able to move people out of agriculture, move farmers out of agriculture into the urban areas, because urban areas need cheap labor. Which actually means he was saying that we need Dihadi Mazdoor, and that is what we need to do, force people to abandon agriculture and move into cities.
So
this was the design.
Right, and
this was the design. So I think, hold on, I just want to say that your question of investment, Srinivas, you quoted the GVA. Let me quote the GDP figures that Reserve Bank of India has given. Reserve Bank of India says between 2011-12 and 2017-18, only 0.4% of the GDP was the public sector investment in agriculture. So what miracle can you expect when for 50% population, you are only investing 0.4% of
with
GDP?
Such a small investment.
Okay, let me... And you give 6% of just tax concession to the corporates.
Let me make another point. And we have a graphic also for this, about how today and all political parties are saying we are pro-farmers, we want to liberate them from the clutches of mandis. Actually, political parties, as we know, control mandis directly across the country. One of India's biggest fruit and vegetable mandi in Nasik, this is the Lasalgaon mandi in Nasik, completely dominated. It's an all-party situation here. The president is Suvarn Jagtap of the BJP, Vice President Preeti Borgude of the NCP, coordinators and directors include 7 of the NCP, 2 BJP, 2 Shiv Sena and 2 Congress. तो ये बताइए मंत्री जी कि आप कह रहे हैं कि फार्मर को एपीएमसी से हम वो कर देंगे, राहत देंगे, he can go, बट आपके खुद के नेता मंडी में बैठे हुए हैं.
इसमें मैं सहमत हूं कि मंडी में बैठे हुए व्यापारी भी वो किसी न किसी पार्टी से जुड़े हुए हैं, लेकिन इसमें कोई बुराई नहीं है. होना ये चाहिए कि मंडी में 15-20 व्यापारी हैं, 30 व्यापारी हैं, उसके पास 100 गांव का एरिया है, उसको कंपटीशन चाहिए.
बट इसमें बुराई,
कंपटीशन मोनोपोली बंद करने के लिए इस
मंत्री जी, मंडी तो फार्मर के बेनिफिट में होनी चाहिए. उसमें नेता और व्यापारी कैसे बैठ गए उसमें? उनकी कमेटियां तो फार्मरों से भरी होनी चाहिए.
नहीं, फार्मर वो नेता फार्मर
सबसे बड़ी नासिक की मंडी के प्रेसिडेंट आपके सुवर्ण जगताप हैं, भाजपा के.
दूसरा मैं बताना चाहता हूं,
नहीं सर, मैं माफी मांगूंगा, मैंने पूरी नेता इस नासिक मंडी के लिस्ट देख ली, उसमें एक भी फार्मर नहीं है, सिर्फ नेता ही नेता हैं.
सर एक मंडी का
एंड पवन खेड़ा, इवन द कांग्रेस एनसीपी, isn't it true, Pawan Kheda, all parties including Congress and NCP all are controlling mandis?
Vasu, there is
Pawan Kheda, very quickly.
I know there is a confusion which you are getting into here. I was in the Delhi government and we would deal with the appointments in APMC. Now there is a set format. You have to have two representatives of growers, farmers, that is, some representatives of course, Aadhiyas, social workers, different categories. Now, obviously, the government in power will try and accommodate people who belong to their ideology. Nothing wrong with that. Today, we have journalists who belong to ideologies sitting on channels. You know who we are talking about. So, this is
that is
mandated by law.
That is not a good thing, Pawan. That is not a good thing.
No, it's not. But this is mandated by law. Nothing wrong.
But the law doesn't say you have to have political leaders.
Vasu, you are trying to demonize politics by saying कि भाई political leader तो कहीं वो भी farmer है भाई, वो politics में है, इसका मतलब नहीं कि वो किसान नहीं है. So don't demonize politics. When you say कि अरे political party के हैं, obviously political party also fights for the rights of that particular category, whether it's farmers, whether it's growers, whether it's transporters, whoever it is.
That's something that is something that you know a lot of farmers may not entirely agree with, but we are completely out of time, I'm told. So we'll have to leave it there. दोबारा इस सब्जेक्ट पे जरूर आएंगे मंत्री जी, और दोबारा आप जरूर हमारे शो पे आइए. थैंक यू वेरी मच.
क्लैरिफाई हरियाणा के बारे में कर देना चाहता हूं.
चेक
हरियाणा के ज्यादा मंडियां हैं.
टाइम सर खत्म हो गया. जी बोलिए. बहुत
3 साल तक चेयरमैन रहे. सारी मंडियों के चेयरमैन उसी मंडी की टेरिटरी का फार्मर था और वाइस चेयरमैन मंडी का आड़ती था. तो फार्मर और आड़ती का कॉम्बिनेशन बना के हरियाणा के अंदर ऐसा रहा है, और वो जो उस इलाके की, उस मंडी के इलाके का
बिल्कुल सर, वक्त खत्म हो गया है. मैं बस इतना बता दूं कि कल मैं सोनीपत के किसी मंडी में गया था. वहां के सारे की सारी कमिटी सब आड़ती थे, कोई फार्मर मुझे नहीं दिखा. एनीवे, विल हैव टू लीव इट देयर. थैंक यू सो मच फॉर वॉचिंग रियलिटी चेक. गुड नाइट.